So, you just got a new camera and you're ready to start taking some awesome shots for your Instagram feed. Well, first, you've got to learn how to use this to get the maximum potential out of it. And I'm going to show you guys in this video the easy way to do it. My name is Blaine Bishop. I'm an amateur filmmaker and photographer. I went to college studying all this sort of different stuff. I've learned a lot of different tricks along the way, and I'm going to show them here with you by just teaching you the basics. Lots of people get really intimidated when they get a new camera, so they just put it on auto, but that can really destroy a lot of your shots. However, if you learn how to properly use it, you turn that mode dial to the M for manual, you'll have full control over those shots and how they look. So what does manual do? Manual gives you full control over the camera's settings, such as aperture, shutter speed, ISO, white balance, all of it. So you'll have full control and the camera's not doing any of the thinking for you other than the autofocus, if you use it. So as I said, the main four that we're going to be going over in this video are aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and white balance. So the first one we're going to go over is aperture. The aperture is a small opening in a camera lens made of these small blades that adjust how much light can get into the sensor. Aperture is measured in f-stops. A faster f-stop, such as 1.8 like this nifty 50 has, will allow a huge amount of light in and onto the sensor, making your images brighter. A smaller aperture, such as f22, is a really small opening in your lens. It'll let in less light, but it will affect your depth of field. Now, aperture does affect your depth of field a lot. One of these lenses, like the nifty 50, where it has a 1.8 aperture maximum, it can open up really wide and let a whole bunch of light in, which will cause what is called depth of field. So on a 1.8, the background will start to be blurry because of the amount of light that's being let in if I am the subject and it's being focused on me. With this camera right now, I've got it on f4, and you can see that it's already starting to get that blurriness, like the background isn't as sharp as I am. Now, there's some upsides and downsides to this. f1.8 will give you that really nice blurry background, which is very satisfying for things such as portraits and that sort of stuff. But if you're trying to take a landscape, you're going to want to close that aperture down to f8, f11 to be able to have more of that landscape in focus. So the next one we're going to be talking about is shutter speed. Now, shutter speed is how fast that shutter inside your camera opens and closes and lets light in on the sensor. Then this can range from as long as 30 seconds to as short as 1/8,000th of a second. And this will greatly affect how your images and shots are exposed. Now, depending on what you're shooting, it is going to affect what your shutter speed is. If you're shooting fast-moving subjects such as sports or some wildlife, bird photography, that sort of stuff, you're going to want a fast shutter speed, 1/250th of a second or a shorter amount, so that when they're having those movements, you're going to be taking pictures and that they're going to be sharp as a tack and they're not going to have blur or trailing or whatever it may be. Now, on the other hand, if you're shooting something where the subject isn't moving as much, you can lower that shutter speed a lot to allow your exposure up, and if they're not moving a lot, it's not going to cause motion blur. However, if you get too low, to like 1/8 of a second, you're going to start getting shake in your hands in your images. So you might need something like a tripod or anything of that sort to be able to negate that shaking. Shutter speed allows for a lot of different creative choices in your work, and I can make another video on that if you guys would like to know more on different ways of how shutter speed affects your shots, but it allows for a lot of creativity, so play around with it in your different shots. Alright, I just want to take a moment here and say, first off, thank you for watching this much of the video. If you guys are enjoying it or finding it helpful, please like and subscribe. It helps me know what kind of content that you guys want, and it also gives me more of a motivation to be able to create this content for you. So, if you enjoy it, like and subscribe. On to the next one. Alright, the third setting and the last one of the exposure triangle, as we call it, is ISO. Now, ISO can be very confusing to a lot of people. In simple terms, it's a number that will, when it's lower, make your photos darker, when it's higher, it'll make them brighter. That's the simple version. What ISO really is, it is actually an old film term. ISO was the measurement of how sensitive film was. Now, on modern digital cameras, it's a measurement of how sensitive your sensor is going to be to light. Now, lower ISO, such as 100, are going to be where it's the least sensitive to light, and so your image is going to be darker, and you'll make up for that with your shutter speed or your aperture. ISO is really just a measurement of your camera's sensitivity to light. So, if you make your camera's sensor more sensitive to light, it's going to cause grain or noise, especially in dark sections like down here. You'll see this little like film grain that you won't want in your videos because it's not very pleasing to the eye. So the final setting we're going to talk about is white balance. Now, white balance, unlike the previous 3 settings, does not affect your exposure. Instead, it affects how colors are processed by your camera. So, what you're going to want to do with white balance is you're going to want to have the whites as close to white as possible. This can change depending on where you're at. If you're outside or if you're inside, the white balance is going to be very different because of the sun's lighting versus your housing's lighting. So you just have to learn how to use it and get it balanced to where colors look as natural as possible. So, these are the basic settings of your camera and how they work. I really hope this video helped you out and that I described it in a way that was simple enough for you guys to understand. And if you have any questions about it, please leave a comment down below. I will try and respond to as many as I possibly can. And go out, create something, and happy shooting.